ที่ตัวปอเป็นชั่วโมงตัวมุกเป็นชิตาตัวจ่อช่วงเป็นมุกตั้งตัวสายตัวซอตัวตรงเซนโพเซมินโซตาตัวช่วงอินซิจูปวดตัวอยู่ชาส่วนจริงเรากูจะเป็นมุกใช้สกิชิตาตัวเอาตัวต่อจ่อช่วงตัวรู้ได้จากอเมริกานอเดียเกิดในยอลังตื้อเทียวิลิจางก็ต่อจ่อช่วงตัว Thank you for your time and to sit down with me and to talk about some of the legacy that you went through in the Hmong community. And thank you, Rachel, for you too, to be part of it. Okay. First of all, I would like you to, before we talk about more further the discussion, I would like you to introduce yourself so we know who you are.
Okay. I'm Joe Westermyer. Live here in St. Paul. I've worked here and lived here for about 65 years of my life. I'm 80 years old this year and still working at a hospital here in town, working with veterans. During most of my career, I worked here at the University of Minnesota and retired from there about 10 years ago.
Okay. And Rachel?
I've lived all my life here except when I was in Laos and in Oklahoma. I was born about 2 miles from here, and I've lived a good portion of my life right here in St. Paul, in 55 years in the house that we're in today. And I went to school, grade school here, high school here, and college out of town, and my master's program was back here at the University of Minnesota.
Well, Joe, let's talk about you went to Laos. Tell us a little bit on that, or you can tell the whole story, you know.
Yes. Well, we went to Laos 50 years ago, so I'm thinking, why did we go so many years ago? And I think part of the reason was it was an opportunity to do good. There was a lot of work to be done in Southeast Asia at that time, and so I was invited to go to Laos, and it was an opportunity. I think the second reason is that 50 years ago, Southeast Asia was kind of the focus of the whole world, and what was going to be the future in terms of politics and big countries attacking little countries, and culture similarities and differences, all of that was kind of coming to bear. So being a part of that as a young man was important to me. And then also we were getting into our late 20s, and I thought if we were ever going to be involved in something international, if we were ever going to leave the country, we should do it now while we were still young and strong and our children weren't in school yet, and it was now or never. So,
So why you end up in Laos?
Well, I think in terms of the work, it was very, very many things, because there were not many doctors in Laos at that time. There were about 18, 19 doctors for about 3 million people. And partly my job was to go and take the position of my boss, who was going to be gone home to the United States for 4 or 5 months, so he couldn't go home until somebody was there to take over. So that was one reason. Beyond that, it was up to my boss to see what needed to be done. And I'd say about a third of the time I worked at Samtong Hospital, and about a third of the time over those 2 years, so each of these thirds was about 8 months, about a third of my time was in various villages or disasters or epidemics or people displaced out of their homes by war. I would be out in the rural areas for days, weeks at a time, working with whatever situation we were facing. And then about a third of the time was working in Vientiane, either for administration or political decisions or teaching, things that related to public health planning. And so I became interested really for the first time in public health while I was in Laos.
Mm-hmm. And Rachel, did you went with him while he was in Laos too?
Yes,
or?
we went together,
Okay.
and at the time, I will correct you, it's over 50 years. It actually is 52 years, because our son was one.
That's true.
Yeah.
Our daughter was just 3 when we left the United States, and we had planned to spend 2 years wherever we went. We told people we'd be gone for 1, but we were actually there. We knew we were going to be there for 2. So with just one 3-year-old, we felt it would be fairly easy to travel. And I had no particular plans because I had never been out of the country. So when I arrived, I had to learn my way around because, as you heard, he's out of town a great deal of time and I was in a brand new country. So one of the things I did was learn Lao, and at that particular school I learned Lao in the morning. I taught English to the local people in the morning and I learned Lao in the evening. So that first year I taught school at some school called the Lao American School in downtown Vientiane, and watched my 3-year-old. I did have a house girl, and to help me with all the various things that in America are automatic, like dishwashers and wash machines. And I was pregnant at the time, and so I had my baby that first year at OB Hospital with my husband and a friend. They were my doctors. So I have a Lao son, Lao American son, and I kept myself busy. The second year, they asked me to teach at the American preschool in KM6, and it was a very diverse 4-year-olds. And I had a classroom, some Americans, 1 Filipino, 1 Vietnamese, and 2 Lao in my class of about 8 or 10 little children. And that was a good year, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed both of those things. I'm a teacher by training, and I just enjoyed the young children. And because I had some help at home to watch the children, I could go do those things. And I learned how to cook the local food, and shop at the local market was Dalatsao is something I greatly enjoyed. And I'd ride my bike down to the Dalatsao. We lived perhaps less than a mile, and I'd ride my bike down there with a little basket on the back and buy all the fruit and vegetables for both myself and my house girl, and we divided things up and tried to cook.
And that's like
1965 to
65.
1967.
Okay.
Our son was born there in April of 1966.
So Joe, I'm sure while you were there, you were like a doctor or what?
Yes.
Yeah. So what kind of doctor? Surgery?
Well, a lot of the work at Samtong Hospital involved surgery.
Okay.
Particularly during the dry season, there were a lot of battles going on, and so there'd be attacks on villages, so the militia would be wounded. Other times, some of the Lao Army and some of the northern tribal units, the special guerrilla units, would be making attacks, and so there were a lot of wounded, sometimes coming in 30 in a time, maybe 100 at a time. So we would be very busy whenever that was going on. During the wet season, the monsoon season, I think we saw probably more medical illnesses, and there were little battles, little patrols of one side would run into a patrol on the other side, and there would be sharp, brief battles, or somebody would step on a landmine. So there continued to be some military action, and then also people would have been displaced from their homes, and so they were trying to establish a new farm, a new home in a valley someplace, and so new illnesses, new adjustments, malnutrition.
Well, it's now we have Hmong, live in the United States here. Back then, while you were there, what's some of your impression, when you see the Hmong people during that time?
Well, I would say that over time, particularly when I was working out in the villages, I was in areas where I was unfamiliar, and there was usually somebody that I was working for or with. Mostly those were Hmong people, but sometimes they were Lao or Lao Tung people. And so I was dependent on them to take care of me. So they would make sure that I was sleeping in a dry place and had enough food, and if there was an attack or we had to move, they would look after my security. So in a sense, during that time, I became very loyal to the people that I was living with, because I knew that they were taking care of me, and
Sure.
my life depended on their taking care of me. And then during the day, I guess I would pay back by doing what I could with whatever problem we had. It might be an epidemic, it might be wounded people, it might be a flood or something like that.
Mm-hmm. While you're working at Samtong, you met this girl, this Hmong girl.
Yes.
What made you think, to bring, her all the way to study in America here?
Yeah. Well, I would say in the beginning, I didn't have a special judgment about Song Chao compared to all the other people that I worked with. So in the beginning, I wouldn't have had any thought like that. But during the time that we were in Laos, sometimes I would bring children whose parents weren't around, but who were wounded or injured or ill, down to Vientiane, and Rachel would take care of them when I would go back back up to Samtong. So, would you like to tell the rest of the story from there?
Yes, he brought several people home. He brought two little girls that needed some, one of them had some eye injuries from shrapnel, so they stayed with me. It's so long ago, I can't remember if it was 1 week or 2 weeks, but they stayed with me and were treated at the local hospital. I had a young baby with a serious colon problem. He needed something called a colostomy. People are familiar with that. And he was with me about 6 weeks. And he was with me before I had my own son, and he was with me after I had my son. So I had him, and then I had twins. I had a Hmong twin, my Hmong son, and for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
I was just helping for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So I had the two of them for a while.
One was that one of the doctors I worked with, an American doctor, a woman actually from this state, we went to school together by coincidence, and she had adopted a Lao child from the local orphanage. She worked at the orphanage. So I think that probably influenced Rachel to think about maybe she should do the same thing. So Rachel began to talk about maybe if I brought one of these children home, she might adopt the child and take the child back to Laos, or maybe we would back to the United States, excuse me, or maybe a child from the orphanage, and that would be a way of doing something for Laos, because even though there were difficult times in Laos, there were times when it was far too exciting, and it was a big challenge for us to adjust to another country. I would say, by and large, our overall experience was very good. I mean, people really were very kind to us, and I think as we tried to accomplish things, we were able to do that. I think we were matured And I think we were successful in the things we turned out to do. So I think that there was a feeling, maybe even more with Rachel, about paying back or reciprocating for all the things that Laos and the people of Laos had done for us. There were lots of orphans around the country at that time because of the war. And so maybe bringing home an orphan would be something to do for the country. And my response was, yes, we could do that, and I'd back you up if you wanted to do that. But I said, maybe you might also think about bringing home somebody to be a student or to study. I said, if you bring an orphan back, it'll be more for you and for that orphan.
Yes.
But if you bring a student back, you might be able to contribute more in the long run to Laos and to the country.
Sure.
So I think that discussion went on for some months. We didn't make a decision, but Rachel's mother came to visit us. And so she was a part of the discussion too. So I think, is there anything you want to say about this?
Well, I think the more I reflected on helping one for me, or helping many, the helping many began to appeal to me more. And so we talked about how would we do that, and who would we choose. And and my mother was part of the discussion, and I said, Joe had some suggestions on, maybe these 3 people work with me. I think they might be the people we should consider. And so we talked about each of them. They worked as a little trio, and I really didn't know them, so he described each one. And 2 of the girls were already in serious relationships and about to be married. And we didn't feel they would want to come. So he said, well, Sancho is single, and maybe she'd like to come. I said, ask her.
So I think at that time, we hadn't decided that Song Chao should be the person, but more that there should be a person. I think as we were discussing it, this was going to be more Rachel's project than mine, because we were both coming back to training here. I was starting a new training at the university, and so part of it would be who would be somebody that Rachel could get along with, and also that Rachel would be able to be supportive and helpful to that person, because I probably couldn't do very much. And I forget who we discussed or how we discussed, but I started to think, just in my daily work or people that we knew, who would be a person who could not only make it in the United States, because we knew from having made it in Laos that it was going to be just as difficult for somebody from Laos, or maybe even more difficult, to make it in the United States.
We had an American support community.
Yeah.
There was no Hmong community here.
Right.
Sure.
So that was one thing. And then another is that there were some very worthy people, but they might not do very much to help the Hmong community. They might be able to do very well in art or do very well in business, but that wouldn't benefit the community. But somebody working in health or education, it would benefit the community, and I knew people in education too. So we discussed various people over time, and I think it was at that point, probably maybe just not too many more months before we came home, that we began to talk about specific individuals who might be interested in this, but also would meet these criteria to be of some help to their people in the long run.
And also you knew about the surgery program here.
Yes, I knew about programs that were going on here. And so that, it was sort of at the end of that process that went on for some months that Song Chao's name came up, and then Song Chao versus various other people, and then eventually I think Rachel's mother was a part of that too, and she offered to pay the transportation home for whomever was chosen. So
Okay.
she was part of the decision-making process.
Mhm.
And she, I think in that, she became very committed to Song Chao before she even met her. And they kind of became friends or mother-daughter even before they had an opportunity to meet one another.
Mhm.
So Rachel's mother was involved.
Okay. So the process to take her to America, how long that process?
I think it was the last 2 months we were
Last 2
there.
months,
We were
okay.
leaving in May because his program started July 1st. And so we knew what we needed to do. And so we made decisions on, we need to ask somebody. And we had the finances to do that. They paid some things, we would pay the rest, and her education, anything she needed here, and we would provide a home here. Because she would be living with us for a short while till
Mhm.
she went to her program. And so I think it was less than 2 months, probably. We needed to get past visas and get a passport. There were things we had to do.
Sure. And after you got her in here, this house, how was life changed? I mean, from you, because like lifestyle just different. You have these girls from Laos. Her culture is different. She speak different. She eat different thing. How was that like?
Well, she was very easy to have around. And I had lived in Laos 2 years, so I had Lao friends,
Sure.
and I had American friends, and I could speak Lao. I believe she could speak Lao at that point too, so that's some communication. And she was an eager learner. At the time, you see the backyard, if you just look out the window today, the backyard wasn't quite like this. There was some chairs we put under an apple tree out in the yard, and we studied English during the day from time we had, and she just helped me around with the cooking and so forth, and so we could talk. One of the easiest ways to learn a language is to talk it.
Sure.
And to talk it, you have to talk to somebody. So that was one way I know that helped me learn Lao. And so I figured she could learn English if I did the same thing in reverse. And that worked. And we did sign her up for the school, and I think she was here a total of about 3 or 4 weeks, and then went to the school and lived in the dorm at the school during the week and spent weekends here. And we had the small children, and so they loved having her around, and we loved having her around, and everybody got along really well. Our son was here the other night, and he said that some of the best times was when Song Chao came home for the weekend and he could spend time with her. So
She became the big sister to our 2 children, and they still see her as their big sister even 50 years
They have that
later.
attached as brother
we
and
got
sister.
very attached
Yeah,
to her.
right.
Yeah, my
yeah.
mother was still very attached to her too.
Right.
So my mother didn't live in the city here. She lived outside the city, so she didn't see it that much, but she was very involved.
And I think probably it was a big adjustment for us coming back here.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't think it was, but we had adjusted to Laos. And coming back here, we were going back to school. It was a different role, and we had been very committed to the people and the struggles in Laos. And so coming back was a big adjustment for us. So in a way, we sort of shared that adjustment with Chao, and having her here was, I think, a support for us at that time.
Yeah. In addition to that, this month is like 50 years anniversary for you and for Chao. What do you think about that? I mean, by having her here with you, look at time fly, but look
Time
at
flies,
the,
but we've seen it. We saw her just a couple of weeks ago when her brother died, and so we were at the funeral for 2 days, and so we had just seen her. We, as you can see from some of the pictures, we have major events with her. When she got married, Joe walked her down the aisle, and we were her parents at that. And some of the Hmong gatherings are here in St. Paul for the nurses and the Samtong Hospital people. So that had occurred, I think, last summer or two, and another one about 2 summers ago. People come through here often. So it was wonderful that she could come for the 50 years, and we celebrated right here the other night. Our son and his family came for dinner, and our grandchildren, and they had met Chao just at the Hmong funeral a couple weeks before. So they heard the stories, and they saw their pictures of their dad in the yard and with Chao when we were all much younger. It's a special time.
I think in many ways our original small role in Chao's career for us has been very enriching, because I think her family include us. Her family in many respects is like our family. And I went back to Laos about 7 or 8 times in the subsequent years. Rachel came back a few times with me. And so we got to meet the rest of her family, whom I didn't know. And the 2 nurses that she was very close to, they're also in the United States. Well, one has since died, but we see the one who's still alive. And the nurse that died, we became close to her family. She married a good friend of mine from Laos that I used to work with out in the countryside. So I think that probably those...
And they actually came to live with us for about 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Their children did, yeah.
Their children.
Okay.
So I think those connections, which sort of started with Chao, spread, but they involved people that I worked with. Many of these people Rachel didn't know, but she came to know them. And then I had other friends that probably Chao didn't know, but I worked with either subsequently or I worked with them when I was out in rural areas. So she's met them too. So I think it's probably enriched all of our lives. And she's married a pilot, and all of our family and all of her family flies. So we have aviation as a common.
That's good. That's good.
Aviation and nursing and medicine are our big
Well,
family
here
things.
in Minnesota, especially the Twin City here, is the second largest Hmong population in the United States. Do you two have any, any project work with the Hmong community at all? Any, involved?
Oh, at the present time?
Yes.
Not a project with the Hmong,
Okay.
but our family, we keep very close contact with the family, and there's graduations. We just saw Chao's son in Coronado, California last week, or 2 weeks ago, and we were at their wedding a year and a half ago, or 2 years October, is it, Chao?
Yes.
2 years October. So, we never know when the occasions are going to pop up, but they do. Our other Hmong family has joined us on ski vacations, the whole family, and our son and his family. So sometimes we have 17 people, which doesn't sound like very many, but for 2 people, that's a lot.
Sure.
Our family was very small until we have all these wonderful people that have joined us.
Okay.
When the Hmong started coming here, I had some research grant money and hired a Hmong man who was actually the first Hmong to graduate from an American college, and he came and worked with me, and then I had a little more funds further on, and I hired a few Hmong people to help me run a clinic, and a Cambodian lady and a Vietnamese lady. So we started some clinics for refugees from Southeast Asia, which ran for about 15 years. Okay. So there was about 15 years in there where I probably had as many Hmong patients in the average week as I would have back in Laos. So that was very active and involved with the Hmong community at that time. That kind of came to an end about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I went to work in another state for a while. So, but that was a very busy time where most of my clinical work was with people from Southeast Asia. And that was very rewarding, and I enjoyed that a lot. And that was also a period where I was doing some work with the World Health Organization. So we had a number of visitors who would come and spend a year with me from various countries in Asia and Singapore, Malaysia, a few from Europe. And I think Chao's experience coming here really informed us, or informed me, not only about the training that they had to go through, but also the adjustment living in another country while you're trying to be a student is very, very challenging. And so it really helped me in a variety of ways later in my life.
Well, I know life here and life in Laos back then, totally different world, Any flashback?
Well, actually, I wanted very much to go back. So in 1992, my friend, Joe's colleague, medical colleague, knew I wanted to go back. And she and her husband have an organization in Vientiane, sort of a, what would you call it?
A medical association training?
A training program in it. They had a home there at the time, the training people. And she invited me to go back in 1992 to be part of writing medical curriculum for the Lao doctors. And so I spent 2 weeks on that project. They went a week ahead and made all the arrangements. And I spent the second week at their table. I'm not a physician, I'm an educator. But they knew, number one, I wanted to go back. Number two, I could survive and talk enough Lao that I could be left behind. And three, they knew I was an educator, so I would type and get everything organized for the curriculum.
Sure.
And so I attended the meetings by day and typed by night, and they left after the second week, their second week, my first week. And I was the only team member that stayed behind with the job to get the curriculum translated into Lao and a copy in English. And I left all that behind. So we accomplished a lot in 2 weeks. It was a personal journey for me because I got to go back and see my house and my neighborhood and go to the market and all the things I wanted to do for very many years.
Joe, any flashback on that?
Well, as Rachel was talking, I was thinking that 15 years when most of my clinical work was with people from Southeast Asia was fairly similar, especially for the Lao and the Hmong patients, who were the majority of our patients. And because as we were working with them, they oftentimes came from a village or a town or a district that I had been in, or some of them were wounded, or they lost family members in battles where I was close at the time and I knew exactly what was happening, or they were military soldiers who had ongoing health problems, from some battle where I had been at Samtong Hospital treating the people from that battle. I'm sure some of the people who were my patients here had been my patients there. In fact, some of them would say that I took care of them back in Samtong. So I think that the experiences in Laos continued to be a part of our life here, even in my work, in ways that I never would have anticipated.
一种呢，这个等于在贴出片毛出生速度，可能可把大了呢，要凹凸到较凶，要被蒙得特顿才，他都做这种sample，上面的所达到凶，一直就不到就下，也能对某根据中，啥找到到就呢，这个等于在，这就不是的到包装，你说到被说蒙到干喏，กูอยากจะบอกเลยว่านักการเมืองในส่วนสุดแต่มาชินชีดัว